I'm here with your Pro Tools Exercise 2 tutorial. And if you follow the directions, there's actually a hidden step. The first step is to actually download the exercise file that you're going to need to do. So I'm actually going to start with that. For if you're in one of my classes, you'll probably be accessing this via a link that's hosted on Google. So when you first go to click on that link, you'll probably look at something that looks like this screen. So the first thing we're going to need to do is actually download this zipped or compressed session file. And you can do that by using this button up here. So this is your go-to. You're never going to be able to open these files within Google because they're compressed. They're not designed to be open there. So I'm going to go ahead and download it from here. It'll scan for viruses, and I will warn you, this session takes a little bit longer to download than most of the exercise file, and that's because this is actually a fully mixed session. It has a lot of WAV files within it, so it's going to take a little bit longer to download than most of them. Once this file has downloaded, we're actually going to go ahead and we need to move it into a place other than the downloads folder. I strongly recommend that for this course, and just as a good file management habit, you do not open and save files within your downloads folder. That's really meant to be a temporary location. So I do not want to go ahead and open it from here. What I actually want to do is go into my Finder window. And I actually want to make a place where I'm going to be opening and saving my Pro Tools projects. So a good place for that in a Mac is actually going to be your Documents folder. And for this, I'm actually going to demonstrate making a folder where I can keep my sessions for kind of the duration of this course. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder within my Documents folder. I'm going to give it a very useful name. So in this case, it's going to be Mr. King's Pro Tools projects, and this is where I'm going to save and open all of my Pro Tools exercises for this course, so I always know where everything is, because I will warn you, file management, if not done properly, can get really confusing later. So this is now where what I want to do is take this downloaded folder that I just downloaded for exercise 2. I'm going to go ahead and open it and drag it from my downloads folder over to this folder that I've just made. And I'm now going to need to unzip it or uncompress it or open it, and I can do that simply by double clicking it. You're going to see it's going to open it. And another good file management tip is once you've opened a zipped file, you now have two basically versions of the file. You have a zipped version and an opened one. Right away, I would say get in the habit of, once you've unzipped a compressed file, throw that in the trash. You do not need it. And then you have less things kind of cluttering your Finder. And just keep in mind where this location is, because you're going to need it once you open Pro Tools, because you're going to be using the Open from Drive function that is in Pro Tools. But now I know it's in my Documents folder. There's a folder called Mr. King's Pro Tools Projects, and I can see Lesson 2 Low Roar with all of its requisite files are right here. The next step is I'm going to need to go ahead and open up Pro Tools. I've already saved it as a shortcut, but if you're opening it for the first time, you can also find it by going to the Spotlight search and searching Pro Tools. You can also go to the Applications window. There's multiple ways to open Pro Tools, but I do recommend eventually, once Pro Tools is open, that you either control or right click on it, and we go that we want to keep it in dock. We want Pro Tools to be readily accessible anytime we are working on our Mac. So I've now gone and double clicked my shortcut, and I'm going to go ahead and open up Pro Tools. When you first open it, you're normally going to see the dashboard, which is basically our loading screen for Pro Tools. It's where we can choose which session we want to open, including sessions that have been previously opened, or in this case, a session that we're opening for the first time. And if you're opening Pro Tools for the first time, I will warn you, it can take a little bit of time for it to open as it loads all the plugins. So just keep in mind that when you first open Pro Tools, it's going to take a while to initialize and open everything up. Pro Tools has now opened up. Sometimes when you open Pro Tools, you may or may not see this. If you do, just go ahead and go to the top, and then you can choose which window you would like to be in. Just keep that in mind if you don't see things right away. Most of the time, we're going to what's called our dashboard. This is where everyone pretty much starts a Pro Tools session. And most of the time you should see this, where we are in the dashboard and we're in the new, where we could build a session from scratch. And there's some pretty important decisions we might have to make in the future. But for today, we're not actually building a session from scratch. We're opening a session that we've downloaded that we just saved in that folder that I just showed you. So we're actually going to be using a function in Pro Tools called Open from Drive. The textbook refers to it as Open from Disk. So I'm going to click this, and it's from here that I get taken back to a Finder window window, and I now need to navigate to where I saved that session that we just set up a folder for. So that's why it was important to set that up properly, because now I know I'm not going to downloads, which is not a good place to open or save files. I'm going to the documents folder, and right at the top I can see here's the file folder that I worked with, Mr. King's Pro Tools projects. I go into lesson 2 low roar, and even then I still need to click one more time because this is just a folder. I need to click the PTX file, which is a Pro Tools session file. Once I've clicked that, I can choose open, and now I'm going to be able to open this session for the first time. It'll take a little bit of time to initialize because it's going to be loading all of the files that are in this session, and it's a big session. It has a lot of tracks. It's actually a really cool session. And now, after all of those steps, that was just to get me to open the Pro Tools session properly, and that is a really important skill when you're working with Pro Tools. The first thing that the textbook warns you is that you might see a session notes dialog box when you open it, and it might tell you some inputs or outputs may have become inactive because your audio hardware device has changed. This is a pop-up that you're going to see all the time, and it just lets you know anytime you've opened a session from somewhere else, if you have a different playback engine or hardware, which is quite common. Not everyone has the same hardware when they're opening a Pro Tools session. So just get in the habit of clicking the No button, and then you're just going to set it up yourself, which is actually the next step in the exercise. So now we need to set up our playback engine device. And you're going to do that using, at the top of Pro Tools, at the top of your screen, we have the Setup button. And I'm just going to let you know, you're going to be going here quite a bit when you open these exercises because you're going to need to set your playback engine. So we're going to go ahead and click Setup. We need to go to Playback Engine. And in this case, because I've used this device before, I'm already set up with the playback engine of the Scarlett 2i2 USB. But if you're opening a session for the first time or Pro Tools for the first time, you're going to need to manually do this. And if you're watching this video and you're not in my class, you would just need to choose whatever Pro Tools playback engine you're using, depending what your interface is or what your hardware setup is. So in my case, it's already set up. You might need to choose this for the first time. You click OK. If you change it, most of the time Pro Tools is going to close and reopen all over again. This is a normal thing that Pro Tools does. So just know, in this case, I didn't need to because I already had it set up to the Scarlett. But if you're doing it the first time, Pro Tools is going to be a little annoying, and it's going to make you save and close and reopen the session all over again. But it won't make you do it again if you stick with the same hardware device. Part 2 of the exercise asks you to customize the Pro Tools GUI, and that is for graphic user interface. So what the first thing they want you to do is to change your main counter. Your main counter, as the name implies, is this main counter right in the top of your screen. And they want you to change the main counter to bars and beats. And the way you do that is by clicking this little triangle here and choosing bars and beats. But the textbook asks you to take note of when I do this and I switch away from minutes and seconds, which you can see my timeline is laid on terms of 30 seconds, 40, so on and so forth. As soon as I go to bars and beats, now all of a sudden the numbers I see represent the numbers of bars or measures in my session. So just know whatever we choose our main counter view, it's going to reflect that in our timeline at the top. So, but for the purpose of this exercise, you need to change it to bars and beats. The next thing that we need to do is show and hide our edit window views. And if you've never done this before, this is actually a tricky thing because it's kind of hidden if you don't know where to look. The first thing we want to do is we want to show the left column, which includes the tracks list and groups list. And this is why I think it's difficult. It's actually this little button all the way at the bottom left corner of your screen. If you've never used Pro Tools before, this takes some time to find. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this, and it's going to show us our groups list and, even more useful, our tracks list, which is something that's really useful to have open. The other thing that the textbook asks us to do is to hide the right column, which has our clips list. You can see that I've opened this. It's already here, but we're going to want to hide it. And it's actually the opposite button. It's a right arrow with a line next to it. So it's this little button in the bottom right-hand corner. And just get in the habit, if you've never used Pro Tools before, of just opening and closing these fairly regularly. It's a common thing most people do within their session as part of their workflow, depending on what they're doing. But for this exercise, to get credit, you want this open and you want this closed. The next thing we want to do is edit our Edit Window View selector, and we want to check off which things we do or don't want to see. This is another button that I think is kind of hidden the first time you use it. And these buttons are going to be these little bracket buttons up here. For the edit window, it's actually going to be this one, with a checklist where we can check off which things we do or don't want to see. But just don't get confused. You have another button right up here that says bars and beats. That's for our timeline navigation bar, and we can also make some changes, but for this exercise, you don't need to touch this at all. But in the future, this will be something that you might need to use. But for this exercise, we're just going to go to this one, and you can tell the difference because these columns are laid vertically, whereas the ones for this one are laid out horizontally. So once we're in here, the textbook says that we want to check that we can see the comments, which I just checked here, inserts A through E, sends A through E, IO, which stands for in and out, input output, which is already selected, so I don't need to do anything there, and track color. And then we need to get rid of marker controls. The textbook says we don't want marker controls. And they're just trying to get you to practice customizing your workflow, which is what everyone does once they get used to using Pro Tools. Once you're done, you just need to click anywhere else on your screen, and then that goes away. You can always go back to double check to make sure you've done everything correctly within the textbook. The next step in the directions is to go to the Edit Window pop-up menu or the Edit Window toolbar pop-up menu. And this is also something that's hidden. It's actually this drop-down triangle, the very top right-hand corner of your screen. And they want you to go ahead and show the transport controls, which almost every Pro Tools session you're going to work on is going to have the transport. So we're going to click this and we want to choose that we can see the transport controls. And that's what you're going to think of as your basic play, stop functions that every DAW or playback session is going to need. So now we have our transport controls displayed. The next thing we need to do is that we're now done with customizing our edit window. We now need to make some changes to our mix window. There's a couple different ways to get to the mix window. Obviously, one would be to go to our window toolbar at the top, and from there just choose the mix window. But I'm going to recommend that you get in the habit of using some keyboard shortcuts, and that's actually going to be Command equals. What I'm going to do without using my mouse is I'm going to click Command equals, and right away I'm taken to the mix window. And the next thing we need to do is add some views that we need to see. So the textbook asks us from the view menu or the mix window view selector, show the following edit window views. And unlike the edit view selector, where it was the top left bracket, in the mix window, it's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So it's also a little bit harder to find. So I'm going to go to the mix window view selector, and we need to make some selections here. We need to choose instrument. We also need to choose inserts A through E. We need to choose sends A through E. Meters and faders are already selected, so that's good. Input output is already selected, that's good. Track color is already selected, and the last one we need to get is comments. And once we've done that, we have everything selected that the textbook tells us to. And then I'm going to click anywhere else outside this box, and that view selector goes away. The next thing we have to do is make some changes to our transport window. In the case of my session, the transport window did not come up right away. You can always access your transport by going to Window and going down here and selecting your transport. And you'll see that it says Command and then the number 1 with a square around it. And I'm going to let you know that means numpad 1. That is not the same one as the one at the top of your keyboard that goes horizontally from left to right. This is the numpad, which is those numbers on the far right side of your keyboard that we use quite often in Pro Tools. And I will warn you that Pro Tools makes frequent use of the numeric pad or the numpad. So just keep in mind that when you see it with the square around it, that's referring to the numbers on the right of your keyboard, not the numbers at the top. And this is something that takes a little bit of time to get used to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose transport. And I encourage you to test out making the transport go away or be shown quickly by using Command and then numeric pad 1 on your keyboard. And you can see without using my mouse, the transport is being shown or hidden repeatedly. They ask us to from the transport window pop-up menu, show or hide some views. And that's going to be the same thing we just did in the top of the edit window. It's this little drop-down triangle, a little hard to find if it's your first time. And from there, we want to get rid of counters because it says show everything except, or excuse me, hide all except the ones they give you a list for. So we need to get rid of MIDI controls, get rid of synchronization, and Ableton Link. They only want us to show output meters and expanded transport. And you can see our transport now takes up quite a bit less space. And even if I get rid of the transport, if I bring it back, it's going to come back with those same settings until I change them over here. And it says when you're done, your mix transport window desktop should look something like this. So now over here I have my transport, and I have all this set up. Part 3 wrapping up, it says you're almost finished, but one of the most important parts of any workflow is properly saving your work. In this case, we want to save the session as a new session file, leaving the session file you opened unchanged. So we need to go to File, which is at the top of our screen. We're going to choose Save As. If we just choose Save Session, we're going to overwrite the session that we just had. We want to get in the habit of not always saving on top of our previous work. It's very helpful in Pro Tools to have multiple versions of a session. So in case something gets messed up or you make a mistake, you always have a session you can go back to. So we're actually going to choose Save Session As. And also what's really important when working with Pro Tools is, and for file management, is how we name our session. So in this case, they want you to call it Lesson 2 Low Roar, but then they want you to give your name. And they also want you to put a date, which is very important. So in this case, I'm actually creating this video in May of 2025. And also you want to pay attention to where you're saving it. So in this case, I want to make sure that I'm saving it correctly. If you want a little bit more flexibility in where you're looking, just click in Finder on a Mac, this drop-down window, and you can see that I am saving it within the Mr. King's Pro Tools Projects Lesson 2 Low Roar. So it's going to save it in that same place. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to save it. And now just to check my work, I can go ahead and I can close this session. And if you ever want to fully quit Pro Tools, you actually have to go and click Quit. But I'm going to go to Finder, and I can actually go in and see that I saved 2 separate versions. I have the initial one that I opened, which was this one. And then I also have the one that I gave a much more descriptive name. And that concludes the exercise. The next thing you're going to have to do if you're in my class is you're going to have to go ahead and actually compress this session. And we never turn in just a PTX file. The way to do that is to actually click the entire encasing folder. This is something I'm going to go over repeatedly in my tutorials. And what you're going to do is control click or right click it. We're going to choose compress. It's going to zip the entire folder, which is important because to open a Pro Tools session, you need the encasing folder, not just the PTX file. And then when I open it on my end to assess and grade your work, I have the entire encasing folder. I have the initial PTX file that you downloaded. And most importantly, I have the very correctly named file with your name and date in it that I know that's the one I need to open. And from there, I can access all of the session that you worked on. And that will conclude this exercise. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope you found this helpful.